Okay, so I have Jason Schneider here today. He's an NLP practitioner, and for those of you who don't know, NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and we'll get to that in a moment. My name's Kim Victoria, and I'm a fine artist, and my focus is painting with intention, and that's what I believe the old masters of art did. They painted with intention, and so that's my focus. So, I'm interested in NLP as an artist because as I'm starting to study it, I'm seeing where there's a lot of artist blocks or a lot of intentionality that artists could have that maybe old mental stuff is getting in the way. And I'm very interested in learning more. So Jason, why don't you share with us, well, basically what NLP is in a short amount of time and where you are in that, because I know you're an expert in it.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to have this dialogue with you. Before I get into that, even it's going to be really interesting to see how a fine artist and neuro-linguistic programming, how these two kind of seemingly separate fields. I believe we're going to find a lot of underlying similarities and a lot of a good overlap here. So I'm really excited about this. So Neuro-Linguistic Programming, NLP, stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming, which is a fancy way of saying it's about how our neurology, neuro, is programmed through the languages of the mind. So starting with just sensory-based information that we take in through our senses, all the way up to actual linguistic structures, how we describe things. And we can use NLP to really understand and also to influence the unconscious stuff that underlies all of the kind of surface level things that we see in the world. And by understanding them, there's two things we can do. We can then find masters or experts, and by understanding how their unconscious programming is working, we can replicate that in ourselves and also train other people to replicate that in them. So it's kind of a methodology for accelerated learning. And then on the other side of things, it can improve the way that we communicate. So communicating within ourselves, so how we communicate unconsciously to our conscious mind, which is what determines our emotional states and our behaviors, and also how we communicate with other people. So, when I think about art, I think art is a language. So art is one of the ways that we as human beings, it's one of the uniquely human expression. I don't think there are many other animals that do art, if any.
Yeah, not the way we do, for sure. And wow, that's a really good description, because you're saying that it addresses all the senses, so it's addressing the visual sense.
Yeah, most definitely.
And how we translate, because that's what fascinates me in art, is that whole idea of translating the visual into a two-dimensional or three-dimensional piece of art, and how does that art communicate what we were inspired by to our viewers of our art?
Yeah, and like I said, so one of the languages of the mind, when we talk about language in NLP, most of the time people think about, the general population thinks about spoken language and written language.
Yeah.
But much more primal than that are these visual representations, auditory representations,
yes,
feelings and smells and tastes.
Yes.
That we are, and it's through this kind of primal experiential realm is what we use our spoken language and our written language, kind of like we abstract from that in order to describe this primal raw sensory material. And so really, the just visual representations or sensory representations are much more unconscious. They influence us at a deeper level sometimes than even spoken language can.
Yes, absolutely. And that's been my focus of study for over 20 years, is how does the visual image impact our emotions? And it does tremendously, and it's universal. I consider visual language one universal language. It's true for everybody. It's really, really fascinating, and it's what I love to teach, is that idea that when we see a lot of horizontal lines, for example, people are going to feel more calm. And there's actually science behind that.
Yes.
And it has to do with gravity.
That's
Because when we see like the horizon line, which is a major horizontal line, or we're standing on level ground, we are in contact with gravity. We feel balanced. If we see horizontal lines, that translates in our mind as being anchored on the earth in balance with gravity, so we feel safe. When we feel safe, we feel calm. So it's this whole thing, and all the, every other kind of use of direction builds from that horizontal, our base, our base layer, our connection with the earth and gravity.
That's a fascinating way of looking. I've never heard of that before. That's really amazing. And I think it's the same thing with certain colors as well. I'm sure there are studies that say that the color red, I actually saw a study yesterday talking about how people who are wearing red feel more attractive. And so, and certain wildlife with bright colors. So some of these, we refer to these as submodalities in NLP. So we have the modalities in NLP are referring to the different sensory systems. So we have a visual modality, an auditory modality, a kinesthetic modality, olfactory, and gustatory. And we focus mostly on the main three. So visual, auditory, and kinesthetic are the primary three that we use.